Hi, welcome to Promo Insiders, an ASI media podcast that covers the issues that matter most to the promotional products industry. I'm Chris Ruvo for ASI. I'm joined today by my colleague Nate Kuzma, ASI Senior Executive Director of Research, and today we're talking about promo on an international scale. In particular, we're going to focus on some of the top findings from ASI Research's groundbreaking second annual report on the European promotional products market. In 2023, ASI Research notched an industry first with a comprehensive study of total distributor sales across the United Kingdom and European Union. We followed that up this year with an even bigger study on distributor sales in Europe, one that also looked at other important trends and phenomenon playing out in the cross-Atlantic market. Given promo's growing international interconnectivity, you're not going to want to miss this discussion. So Nate, that was a mouthful. Thanks for joining me today to go over this study. It's really an impressive piece of work, and looking forward to chatting.
Yeah, no, it's a fun study to do, and I know that might not sound like something that is typically fun for most people, but for me it is, because it provides something new to the industry that otherwise isn't available. And I think that that's something that, as our industry continues to become more global and as companies continue to go more multinational, it's important to understand what's going on, much more so than just in the United States and Canada. We need to look abroad as well.
Very good and great context, and I think we'll probably even discuss that topic in particular more as we get into this. But just first, I kind of gave an overview there, but tell us a bit about the study. How was it done, and if you have anything more to say on why it was important, that would be great too.
Yeah, sure. So the way the study's done is, listen, this is not, it's a challenging study every year to do. So we are talking to, I would say, a good dozen leading industry figures, including people who head up some of the most important and largest European country-based associations. We also look at a lot of government data, a lot of IMF data. We will look at everything from population trends to what is happening within a country's individual economy. How fast are they growing? This year especially, we had to look at how much of an impact was inflation having. Sure. Because last year when we did this study, it wasn't nearly as big of a factor as it was this year. And listen, it's a bit of a science here, right? It's a little bit of science, a bit of art. Because when you're trying to take into account the overall promotional product sales across every European country on an individual basis, you have to really make sure that what you're reporting out there makes sense to the people that are there. So we actually significantly value the relationships we've been able to create with our overseas colleagues, because they help us to make sure that when we're doing these calculations from over here in the United States, that we're not completely off base, that we understand what we're doing, and that the algorithm that I've been able to put together over the last 2 years is making sense with the numbers that we're putting out. So it's as I said, for me, this is a fun study to do. It's something new, and I think every year we do this, we're going to get a little bit better at it.
All right, interesting perspective, and just to sum up, it's a combination of everything from your crunching numbers on macroeconomic data for each country to advertising, marketing sector information from individual countries to in-depth, often long conversations with industry leaders based in Europe. So it's this amalgamation of all those factors to where we arrive at the numbers that we're arriving at.
Correct, absolutely.
All right, very, very good. Okay, so there's some new things about the study this year. I mentioned in the little preamble that it's bigger this year. What is new about the study? Can you tell people about that?
We still measure all of the EU countries and the UK, but we also added in 3 other countries this year, and we're going to be looking to expand this out further in future iterations of the study. But this year we added in Switzerland, Norway, and Iceland, and I say them in that order because they are vastly different sizes. Like Switzerland is very nearly $1 billion in sales in 2023. Norway is a little bit less than half of that, and Iceland's small. I mean, Iceland's about $30-40 million. It's a small country, but what we're doing is we're trying. That was just a first shot we did at what countries would be of most interest. And also Iceland, it was there just because it was a small country and it was very, very approachable. Right, a lot of distributors that we talked to actually have looked into Iceland. So we had a pretty good feel for that. And when
Is
you're
that
dealing with,
right?
yeah,
Yeah, just what about the market? It's just as an aside, is it particularly appealing about Iceland? Because I think no disrespect meant, but I think the population is half the size of the county that we live in Metro
it
Philadelphia.
is. So let me rephrase. It's not that it was appealing in that they went into it heavily, but they had looked at it.
Got it. Okay. Okay.
So that's really more what it was. They had looked at expanding into Iceland, or they'd been approached about it, and then they looked at the market. And in some case, they decided it just wasn't worth doing. Switzerland, on the other hand, is just a massive, an absolutely massive market. And it's not necessarily that all the promotional products are being used in Switzerland, but so many international organizations and sports federations and such are housed and headquartered in Switzerland. So that's one of the reasons that market is so big. And Norway is just another one of these. I think it's a Scandinavian country.
It
Pretty
is.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't want to make anybody.
It's a very affluent Scandinavian country.
It is. Yeah. So that was, and they're not EU, but I think a lot of people would actually consider them to be if you don't know.
Yeah, well, they're geographically part of Europe. They're a significant economy given the relative population size. They have an important role in the world economy because of the the energy production that's generated out of there. So it's a very notable economy and market to study, I think.
And that was the reason that we added. Next year, I don't know exactly what we're going to do, but I would imagine that there's going to be another 2 or 3 countries that we'll be looking to expand the study into, especially as this study has grown so much over the past year, where we've had other people reaching out to us for participation in it. We've already made contacts in some other countries for 2024 that we'll be looking to talk to as well.
All right, very good. We buried the lead a little bit, but I wanted people to have the context of where this comes from, that we're not just throwing a number out there. But of course, the big drum roll is for what is or what was in 2023 promo distributor total sales across all those countries that you studied. What was the total?
Yeah, just over 14 billion.
Just over 14 billion. Okay.
Just over 14 billion. Of that, in the EU, they accounted for about 10 3/4 billion, and the UK was about 2 billion.
A little over.
So
2
the
billion,
other 3 countries that we added in contributed just about like 1.4, 1.5 billion dollars to the rest. So in total, it came out to 14.1 billion.
All right, and I want to make the point that if someone were to look at the study that we did last year and look at this year, they'd say, man, Europe was up like 13% over, and that's not an apples to apples comparison. It's because we added some countries, some numbers were reevaluated, things of that nature, right?
And I think that's the important thing here. We just said that numbers were reevaluated, and they were in 2 of the countries. And the reason we did this, the reason we put sort of our, toe in the water last year, was because otherwise you can spend a lot of time just discussing this and thinking about doing this, as opposed to when you put something out there, then you're going to get people saying, I think you're right, I think you're a little bit too high, I think you're a little bit too low. But without actually having it out there, I don't believe that would have ever taken place. So I'm often happy. I try not to be wrong, but in this case, I don't know that I was wrong. I don't know that we were wrong as much as we were putting something out there to give people something to react to. And that's the most important thing you can do sometimes in, research.
And based on that reaction, quite simply, just there was a reevaluation of Spain and Portugal that sent some of the revenue there higher. Is that correct?
That is all it was. It was nothing. Yeah. And that's what it was. And when we spoke to the people, it's not that they were offended that we had come in lower, but they said, listen, I have different perspectives. I have different experiences. And let me tell you what they are. And really fascinating conversations come out of this study.
So on that though, we know that there's obviously a lot of. Europe is an extremely diverse place culturally, economically. What were the top 5 countries? Can you rattle them off there off the top of your head?
Yeah, I think I can. But thanks for putting this in the pre-prepared questions. The UK, even though they're not in the EU, is right up there. Germany is well up there. Yeah, Germany is the biggest country. As you know, it's not quite as Germany goes, so does the rest of Europe in this, but something like that. Yeah, Italy is very, very strong.
And France, I think, right?
And France.
And then you preempted me on this a little bit. I wanted to talk about Switzerland because Switzerland came in number 5. It's a country in terms of overall distributor sales. It's a country with under 10 million people. Those other countries you mentioned in European terms have relatively large
Sure,
populations. They're home to, big brands, but Switzerland really, quote, punched above its population weight, if you will. You
it
touched
does.
on it before, but since we're having the discussion now, can you just reiterate why Switzerland placed as high as it did?
Yeah, it's really just because of the presence of so many international companies, organizations, sports federations. They're all headquartered in Switzerland. So
Hmm.
what happens is the decisions of what products are going to be used by those organizations are being made in Switzerland. So they're being sold through Switzerland and then
Okay.
distributed in many cases worldwide. So
Right.
that's really what the rationale is.
Yeah, I found that really interesting that you have all this business transacting through there and then moving globally potentially. So Switzerland, who knew, is a very significant player in the global promotional products
Completely.
market because of its the industry that is headquartered there.
Yep.
So good stuff on that. I'll say I had my two bits on this. Some of the other big ones, right, were maybe ones we'd expect, but not necessarily everybody. They were some of the more larger,
Hmm.
in economic terms, affluent Northern European countries. Your Netherlands, Belgium, Sweden
Yes.
was in there, kind of rounding out the top 10, and then Spain, which has a large population and a strong tourism sector, and to be fair, a fairly advanced economy as well. Kind of we're all part of that. So that's where you're looking at some of your biggest players in terms of where distributors are generating their money. So
For
if you're
sure.
thinking about going into the market over there, those are maybe some countries that you want to look at.
Yeah, and I think there's
Um,
that. Unlike, I think that in many cases, and this is just through conversations I've had, when I was at a conference over in Germany back in January, there is still room for, like, I would say, robust growth across Europe. Not to say that there isn't room for growth in America, but it's very different. The market is not nearly as mature over there as we have over here in North America.
That's a really interesting point, and then we'll have to. Well, I was going to ask you about some of your big takeaways in a minute, and I would say that's definitely one of them. I'd say is that it's not a saturated market, and there's room for expansion.
Yeah, agreed. And it's not. It's definitely not. And it's another big takeaway though, Chris. As when I'm looking at this, it's that there are all of these countries. You're dealing with all of the different countries in the EU and the UK to a point. Even though the UK is obviously a little bit different, but in the EU, I think the days of looking for one country to have explosive growth and another one to be devastatingly bad all are kind of maybe behind us a little bit.
Sure.
And all of the countries kind of moved very much in concert with each other. They were up a couple percent, maybe down 1 or 2%, but by and large, there was no country that was up like 15% or
Hmm.
down 12%. They were within a very tight band. So, what I kind of noticed out of this, and this was something that was confirmed for me by a lot of the conversations that I was having, and then confirmed the numbers, which was nice, is that as one country's going, they're all kind of moving in kind of the same
In a
direction.
general
So
unison. Yeah.
it was actually, we think about that, sometimes in the US where by and large, yes, there's going to be variations in how individual states are doing, but no state is going to be doing significantly worse than another unless something catastrophic happens. That's
Mhm.
kind of the same thing that I'm seeing in Europe. Not to compare them to the states in the US,
Yeah.
but unless something catastrophic happens in one
Yeah.
of these countries, like maybe happened in Greece, back when they first joined the
Right.
EU,
Right.
you're not going to necessarily see any significant changes vis-a-vis the other countries.
And to that point on interconnectivity, if you will, it really, even in terms of bottom or top line performance, there was a lot of really like mirrored similarity, if you will, between the North American market and the European market, where we kind
Yeah,
of we did eke out an increase collectively. It was a record-breaking year, so I
sure.
didn't downplay it, but still in percentage terms, it was low growth. It was a little over 1% for the year in 2023. It was similar performance across a lot of the large, particularly the larger national markets in Europe. For instance, I looked at it real quick. I think it was 9 out of the 10 top national markets in Europe did see increases just last year, just year-over-year increases, just not huge ones. The exception, as you mentioned before, being Germany, where there was a slight decline,
Very slight, yeah.
and it was you could almost call it flat if you wanted to, but that performance in Germany, given Germany's significance to the European economy, it is the largest economy in Europe. That had some knock-on effect that might have slowed some of the other nations down. So it's just interesting to see how all these things come together and how the market in both North America and Europe kind of mirrored each other's performance last year.
Yeah, Chris, I got to tell you, when I was talking to our colleagues overseas, and then we were also, looking at the U.S. data, what we saw was, and what they saw was that Q1 and Q2, the first half of 2023 was gangbusters. Like it was it was shaping up to be a very strong year. And my God, then all of a sudden, Q3 and into Q4 hit. People were more or less blindsided. They didn't nobody saw that coming in the beginning part of the year. So no, and that's exactly what we saw in the US.
Yeah.
So no, it was the markets are interconnected, but they're also very much parallel each other.
Yeah, very great points. And just in speaking as you did with folks over there in Europe, it seemed to be a lot of the same concerns were what drove down, so to speak, business in the second half of the year, or stifled it. It was, hey, in the case of Germany, it was an actual slight recession in the German national economy. In other places, they may have eked out gains, but there was apprehension about recession, and there was concern about inflation, interest rates. Sound familiar, right? Like all the same stuff that have made marketing buyers apprehensive in North America. The same kind of concerns were weighing on buyers in Europe, and that did inhibit spending to a degree for our market.
100% agree.
So those are a couple of the big ones you want to hit. Or is there other top takeaways there that you have? Just things you could say, hey, if you walk away with nothing else from this study, know these few things.
Yeah, I would say if you walk away with nothing else from this study, I would say there's going to be expansion by U.S. companies into Europe. That is already happening, and that is not going to that's not going to cease anytime soon. So what I would say is, at this point, if you're saying I can't do this, I'm not ready for this, start exploring it a little bit more, because it is happening, whether it's going to be through direct entry, or more likely, I would say, through M&A activity, because that is certainly going to happen. I see stories that are written about this on ASI Central by our media team fairly regularly now. So that is going to continue. So the one takeaway from this is, if you don't want to do any, you're fine with it, then that's okay. But if you're not doing it, don't think that it's other people are not.
Yeah, good.
Because they are going to be exploring Europe for additional growth as the American market continues to mature.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and for other reasons related to that. Just as we sit here recording this on September 4th, just yesterday, September 3rd, Overture Promotions, a top 40 distributor, excuse me, announced their first acquisition in Europe. They bought a Sweden-based distributorship, Brandon. That followed maybe a month or so after Geiger, which has been buying companies in Europe since 2018, made another acquisition, this time in England. Earlier this year, Geiger made its entrance into the German market with an acquisition. So, and it's not just Geiger, it's BDA, it's Myron, it's these large recognizable companies in our industry are making inroads into Europe through M&A. And as you point out, some of the larger companies in our industry are also, even if they're not making purchases yet or haven't recently, they are servicing clients in the European market. All that is creating more competition within Europe. And according to some of the executives I've spoken with over there, even getting more European companies, Europe-based companies, to look into and execute M&A, because they feel hey, there's clearly some opportunity out there if the Americans are doing it, and we might need to compete. So it's another way in which the geographic markets of North America and Europe are influencing each other. So any other big thoughts, takeaways?
No, I just would always say that when you think about the promo industry, it's global. Like it is by far global. And this just goes to prove that it's not just manufacturing over in Asia that comes over to the US, right? There's a lot of business to be had when you look at North America and EU and the UK and some of the other countries that we looked at. So I would say just, keep your eyes open and don't be afraid to explore it. Is it going to be complicated? Yeah, it might be, right? But that's okay because the payoff could be very, very strong, especially as the markets continue, and I would think to be more interconnected than they have been in the past.
Yeah, I think that's great stuff to know. I'll give you a dour one and then hopefully a positive one. The just in talking again to some of the folks in Europe, there is a sense that some of that the doldrums of late 2023 have carried over into 2024, at least the first part of the year. But there was also optimism that the corner was starting to turn, at least in some markets, and that buyers were going to start opening their purse book, so to speak, a little bit more, which is interesting because we are hearing some of that in the North American market too, where we had a drop in Q1, Q2, it kind of ticked up a bit. We returned to growth, and there's some optimism to end the year strong. So.
Yeah, I personally think that especially when you look at this, like companies have been reticent to spend their money. They have it. In many industries, corporate profits are at an all-time high, but they're being very reluctant to spend. Here's the thing. End of the year is coming. They're going to have to spend that money. And I do think that Q3 and into Q4 this year could be quite strong.
All right, we're going to leave it there. It's a nice positive spot to end. We didn't get to it, but hey, sustainability is massively huge in Europe. Read our full report to see why. If you have any interest in that market, you have to be hugely up on that in a legitimate way. Nate Kuzma, thank you so much for chatting with me, head of research here at ASI. Fantastic study and very interesting read and a good chat today.
Christopher, great work as always. Thank you.